Hello, I'm Dr. Basil Kotstein. I'm here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we're going to be talking about how to write about opposing viewpoints. And we're going to be taking an assignment from the Introduction to Critical Thinking course as our example here for exploring this concept. If you're new to the Writing Center, we work with students with all different stages of the writing process. You can come in when you just have the assignment instructions and wondering how to interpret them. You can come in with a paragraph, with a page, or a full-on draft. Just keep in mind that the appointments that you sign up for are for a certain amount of time, and there's only so much we can do in that length of time. So you can sign up for an asynchronous appointment, meaning you schedule time, and around that time, you upload your course paper. It should be in before your appointment rolls around. We'll look at it. We'll send you some feedback via email, generally within 24 hours. Or you can sign up for a real-time appointment via phone or Zoom, in which case you will be joining us either in a phone call or in a Zoom room, and you'll be able to ask questions back and forth in real time. It's really a question of what you think would be most helpful for you, because you may have things where you do want to have a lot of back and forth, or you may want to get all the feedback and be able to sit and think about it and then digest it and have copies of all that feedback in front of you to refer back to. Whatever you choose, go ahead and go to my.acu.edu. Under Resources, select the Online Writing Center, and then you'll see video walkthrough, you'll see instructions for signing up for different things, as well as some various explanations. To submit your paper, after you go ahead and schedule your appointment through the WC Online system, you'll head back to Canvas and upload your paper. And again, we'll send you feedback if it's an asynchronous appointment within 24 hours, or if it's a real-time appointment, you'll get that feedback in the session. Speaking of resources that we offer, our webinars are all recorded, and we have the special tab guide on our writing webinars page. So at the top of the page, there is a chronological list of the webinars being offered in the current term. At the bottom, there is a list of the webinars that we've offered, alphabetically sorted. In the middle, there's this tab guide where you can select your course and by program and see what classes we have lining up with it. So to see what we have with the core curriculum, go ahead and just click on core, and it'll show you the different tie-ins sorted by class. You'll see me referring to APA course paper template. We also have a YouTube channel where you can view recordings of the webinars without having to log in. So if you're on the go, on public transit, or riding in a car as a passenger, and you want to watch a video on the fly, it's more convenient for that. And we have a blog where we explore various writing-related topics. So we have three main objectives today. First, to understand the Here They Stand paper. This is coming from Core 115's Week 5 Assignment 1. And to understand principles of argument analysis, followed by how to take these principles and carry them forward into outlining and drafting. Let's dive in. So this is the Here They Stand paper, coming from Introduction to Critical Thinking, and this follows an earlier assignment where you're asked to give your own viewpoints on things. And the instruction set begins with this preamble where they tell you the purpose of the assignment. In this case, to practice understanding with a point of view different from your own. When we're able to approach knowledge with the humility to wonder, what if I'm wrong? We are better equipped to hold our beliefs with greater complexity, compassion, and empathy. Now, when we look at this, we see, all right, so it's partly a thought exercise, but also partly a question of how do you evaluate someone else's argument that might conflict with yours? How do you make sense? How do you perhaps adjust your argument to counter, or accept that perhaps other people have valid points and that other ideas weren't your original thoughts, you might be changing? All right, so when we move from that preamble, that introduction to what's going on, with the instructions, starting with revisiting the transcript of the video you recorded of yourself earlier in this term, and direction to read the section where you anticipate the objections to your own point of view. Well, we're diving in on that one for this assignment, because you're going to be tasked to write a here they stand script for the other side. What would other people say to counter your argument? And it says specifically, give every effort to making the opposing view as strong and supported as possible. Use the 3 criteria of justification, experience, testimony, and logic. Take as strong an opposite view as possible. And says to be very careful not to create a straw man argument, meaning one that you have set up to get knocked down easily. Straw man arguments is when you have an intentionally misleading, misrepresented, or weakened depiction of someone else's argument. And besides the one given here in the instructions, that would be like if you were to characterize, let's say, an opposing political party as having something that is so exaggerated that it is easy to dismiss. And there's lots of that you can find in any country's political elections. All right, so there's this note that you're supposed to be rigorous, to do your best and give as strong an argument for your opposition as possible. This should be done writing in 600 to 800 words, which is a little bit over 2 to 3 pages. So you have about 250 words per double-spaced, 12-point font, 1-page margin page of text. So we're talking roughly 2 1/3 to 3 1/3 pages. There's a note that you should be citing your sources, so don't just argue things, ground it with sources. Now, there's some further instructions that your paper should be following a particular outline that is similar to the earlier Here I Stand assignment. You should have an introduction where you draw your audience into the presentation, the thesis where you state, okay, what's your stance, what's your claim, and what's your claim that you'll be convincing the reader of, especially in the next section where you're giving the evidence, where you're providing the justification for your thesis, followed by a concluding section, and a reminder to follow the rubric. Speaking of which, let's take a look at that. All right, includes an effective introduction inclusion. Got that. Has a clear thesis that's justified with supporting evidence. Cites authoritative and reliable sources. Okay, so that's something that is not as clearly pointed out in the instructions here. So this is telling me as the reader, okay, so besides just having all these things and having some sources, they should be authoritative. So, for example, if you were to go back to the earlier example about politics, if you were relaying an opposing political viewpoint, you probably wouldn't want to go to someone's blog where they're just commenting on it and, okay, does this person have any authority? Do they have any knowledge? It's not clear. As opposed to you go to a respected newspaper for perhaps some reporting, or if you're talking about a party's political platform, go to the political party's webpage and see what they have publicized there. Or you go to things that are quoting people saying things. So therefore, you're going to more authoritative sources and more direct sources as well. There tends to be some loss when things are transmitted through multiple layers. And so if you are, say, critiquing or taking the opposing argument from another politician, then, or that someone politically opposed to you, you'd want to be grounding that as much as possible in their or that party's statements. Next up, let's talk about argument analysis, because that's something that you're asked to do a lot in this assignment. You're essentially analyzing what the other person would say to refute your position, and then writing your own paper as if you were the other person. So, what are some principles of argument analysis? Well, first, follow a clear logical order. Now, there's more than one order that makes logical sense, but here's one to try on. First, ask, who is saying it? What are they saying? Why are they saying it? How are they saying it? And sometimes, when were they saying it if it's something that has changed and you're taking a more historical approach, or looking at the context in which it was said. How is this regarded by whom? How did or do they regard themselves? And let's take an example here. We're going to reach a little bit back in history to look at Christian evangelists who want to convert people to Christianity. Why? To spread the gospel, to spread the good news. And the how? Well, for a certain period, for example, the Baltic Crusades, they used the approach convert or die, which is, in short, we have your eternal salvation in mind, and this is the best way to save you, to give you really no other choice, convert or die. Now, that is something where, because of that how, that is not how modern missions works, and there are lots of reasons why that's not done anymore. So, starting again with who Christian evangelists wanting to convert people to Christianity, to spread the gospel, and taking the how, watch the good that you're doing in your own Christian life. They lead by example, to inspire by example, to make other people curious in why you do what you do. This is something where that when they were saying it, when they were doing this, is actually really, really important. And you'll get a very, very different argument analysis, even though the first three things are the same, because of that how and the when being quite different. If you try to do convert or die today, I think for many good reasons, those would not be flying. And that brings us to the question of how is this regarded by whom? Well, it used to be very common in many religions to have the loser being forced to convert to your religion or to acknowledge it in some way, or whether that's giving sacrifices, giving tribute, destroying temples, adding idols to temples, etc. And, that is something that back when this first came out, it was not so uncommon or not so unusual. And so if we looked at how the contemporaries regarded it, or how people regard it themselves, that would be rather different than if you were answering this in the present day, I hope. So let's do a brief write-up of that first example. So who and what? Well, we have to acknowledge that Christian evangelists have not always converted people to Christianity in ways that most would consider acceptable today. I would say, unfortunately, not all, but most would not consider this acceptable today. Now, if we look at the when, the why, the how, well, for example, during the Middle Ages, saving souls was considered so important that during the Baltic Crusades, people were forced to convert to Christianity on pain of death. And that is something that is regarded today as barbaric and has been rejected by missionaries and the organized churches. But if we look at it in the historical context, how they regarded themselves, it was considered very common. And we won, that is proof that God is on our side, so convert. And this takes various shapes and forms, even at times with different sects of Christianity, forcing others to convert, or at least convert a name. And that is one of those things where if we look at it and see, okay, we can see the arguments that they're making without agreeing with them, which is a good setup for a here I stand versus here they stand comparison. Like I said, comparing and contrasting to see what the similarities and what the differences are is a great strategy for argument analysis. We highlight the similarities and the differences by asking questions like, well, what do these groups have in common? Do they agree on something, but for different reasons? Looking at modern missions and Baltic Crusaders, they agreed that spreading the good news was a great thing, but for different reasons. And many of the Baltic Germans were looking at, the people conquering the Baltic Germans were looking at it as, oh, hey, we can get wealth and power while doing this. Wait, win-win. Well, very different reasons, I hope, than someone who goes out to evangelize in the modern world. Now, how do these groups diverge? Well, strategies, a lot of justifications, whether or not this is being forced or voluntary. And do these groups actively accept or actively dispute their differences? Well, if we're comparing historical cases with modern ones, there's not much disputing there. But if you look at what was going on at their time, you will find instances where people were protesting and the convert or die stuff is barbaric, and you'll find people who are endorsing it as being good. So, well, which specific groups are we talking about here? At this point, it's a good time to grab the copy of the template. If you're watching this on video, you might pause the video and go and download a copy, and we'll continue from there. So I have here a copy of the APA course paper template, and let's just start by removing these placeholders here that show the different level formatting. And we'll take out these references as well. And so now we have a blank paper to fill in the title of your paper, your name, etc., etc. So let's dive in here and start just with the assignment instructions. And remember, this assignment is calling back to the earlier Here I Stand assignment, which was supposed to follow this order: an introduction to draw the audience into the presentation being made, a thesis where you make a clear stance on what your position is, how you're presenting, approaching this issue, providing a justification for that, anticipate some objections people might raise, and then wrapping up with a conclusion. If we look at the outline for the Here They Stand assignment, we see that, again, we begin with an introduction, a thesis to make it clear what your stance on the issue is, provide justification for that, and a conclusion. Now, one of the reasons is that the objections thing, you're anticipating what you're now writing here. So it's a very good idea to go back and look at what you actually said in that objections set, because that will give you a kernel for starting this one. Some additional reminders. There's that instruction saying to give every effort to making the opposing view as strong and supported as possible using those 3 criteria of justification: experience, testimony, and logic. Okay, so for outlining this, well, we have that introduction where we're supposed to draw the audience into the presentation, or the paper in this case. The thesis, where we make it clear what your stance you are adopting for the purposes of this assignment, not what you personally believe, but the position you're going to be arguing. Provide evidence, which we want to have that breakdown into experience, testimony, and logic. And that conclusion to bring the essay to a logical conclusion, where you wrap things up. Now we want to be using the assignment instructions to create a working outline with any specific headings, and make sure that we're clearly doing everything the prompts ask you to. So let us go ahead and start by pasting this into the paper, into the paper template. All right, so we have our bullets here. And just to make things a little bit easier to see what's what, we're going to italicize those instructions. So here's where we want to ask, okay, who is that opposing group? And if we go back to the earlier slides, you'll see that there are some ways that you can describe this quickly. So in this case, the opposing group is you as the writer. So, all right, who is this entity? or who are you adopting the persona of? What are they saying? So that's going to be this one here. So you can take these and start moving them around according to the prompts here. So here we have, okay, why are they saying it? And now here, this is something that will make sense to have in your conclusion. Now, are these the only places that you might have this? No, you can and have some freedom in where these appear, because how this is regarded by who, that could be part of your evidence in more than one place. For example, testimony here. How is their testimony regarded by that? An experience could go with more than one, but here are two examples of places where it would make sense to be answering those. Same thing with the why, it can come up in more than one spot. And so the purpose here is not to straitjacket you, to make you unable to make choices about where things go as you write, but to provide a clue for where information would logically fit within the constraints of the assignment, so that when you sit down to write, you're working with something that you've already been thinking about, that as you do your various reading and research, that you are able to fill things in here. So, who is this group? Let's say that we are taking a charity that has a object that you don't particularly or personally agree with. Well, identify them here. How are they saying it? Are they broadcasting things? Are they just going into the work humbly? Are they being deceptive about it? Are you talking about something that is current or something that is already finished? Okay, so what's the specific message, or what would they be arguing to counter your earlier Here I Stand presentation? Okay, why do they do it? How does that align with their experience? What is their personal testimony? How do they feel about it? How do others feel about it, perhaps? Contrast those. Logic, okay, so how do they feel about themselves doing this? How do they see this? And why? What's inspiring this? Most people have some belief that what they're doing is right or correct or beneficial, so tell us what those things are, and then wrap it up with a conclusion. Now again, if you are breaking this down, okay, who's saying it? What are they saying? Why? How? When? Is it regarded by different groups? How do they regard themselves? You can start by asking these things and then plug them in to your outline. But seeing that there's some zones or some organizational elements that are already provided to you in the instructions, then that gives you an idea of where it's likely that the answers to these different questions will end up going. And with that, let's wrap things up. If you have any questions, feel free to send us an email at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu, or just schedule an appointment, starting with my.acu.edu, going to resources, and selecting the Online Writing Center. That's it. Have a good night.